ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the COASTER-net Road Trip Rundown. I am Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York, alongside Andy Barchek from Chicago, Illinois. And we're going to have a fun one, Andy, tonight, as I'm sure is evident to us by our pre-show discussion that we had here. We are going to now do the review of what I was calling the Cascade Mountain Coaster Quest, as I went to the Pacific Northwest and also Northern California to a couple of new parks, and then also a couple of parks I have been to before, but rode some new rides at those parks. The trip included Playland at the PNE in Vancouver, British Columbia, Wild Waves Theme and Water Park in Federal Way, Washington, which is just south of Seattle there, Silverwood Theme Park and just outside of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and then we went to Six Flags Discovery Kingdom and California's Great America. So if I remember correctly, I remember talking about in the preview show how I originally had Railblazer in my top 5, and then after riding Wonder Woman, moved it off my top 5 and instead put in Timberhawk Ride of Prey, which is the S&S wood coaster at Wild Waves there. Timberhawk is not making my top 5. It wasn't a bad ride. Had a couple good spots of airtime, some good forces, some decent speed, but felt more to me like a family wood coaster. Wasn't quite as intense as some of the other S&S wood coasters, like the Hellcat at Clementon or the Avalanche/Hellcat at Timber Falls there. Was a bit more of a tamer ride, and a few other rides on this trip surprised me a bit more. So we won't be seeing Timberhawk on here. At number 5 here, yeah, I know, you're so bummed that we're not going to have to talk about a wood coaster. And I almost put Aftershock on this list. I almost put Aftershock on this list. Deja vu. What's that?
You mean Deja Vu?
Yes, right. The Deja, which you never rode Deja Vu, right? No. So the one at Silverwood is the one from Six Flags Great America, if I remember correctly. And for whatever reason, Silverwood has found a way to keep this ride running pretty consistently. From what I understand, if it dips,
it's called maintenance, Danny Miller.
Maintenance. Well, yeah. From what I understand, if it does dip into the low 60s or below, it has trouble running. But when they have normal summertime weather up there, it does run pretty consistently. And if you've never ridden one of the giant inverted boomerangs, I will say the old original trains, I think, are fantastic. The new trains that they put on Goliath at Six Flags New England, the premier trains that are actually 4 across, are absolutely horrible. I rode Goliath at New England with the old V configuration, similar to the B&M Hypers like Behemoth and Diamondback, that V staggered seating. I rode Goliath in its first year with those trains and thought it was really good, and then those new trains were awful. They banged your head around. They were super rough. Aftershock runs the old trains, and it is butter smooth. We rewrote it. It's intense. It's fun. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that ride at all, and it is quite a good ride. I nearly put it on this list. I decided not to, though, because I knew how good that ride would be with the old trains, and it met those expectations. But an honorable mention for Aftershock. At number 5, though, I am putting Timber Terror, which is the out and back coaster from CCI there at Silverwood. In the preview show, I had this at number 3. And I'll say why it's at number 5 here. Really good airtime on the outrun there. There is a really nice speed hill and then a double up, which both parts of the double up have really good airtime. The trains here have buzz bars, which was a nice little surprise. I wasn't sure if it would still have buzz bars. So you do come way out of your seat on those first couple of hills, and then going into the turnaround. The turnaround has some really good lateral forces. And then the second half is a little bit tamer than the first half. It goes pretty slow on the little turn to go into the return run. And then the airtime hills on the return run are sort of like, how Shivering Timbers return run has like the straight hills that then have the little hump over the top, and you get a little bit of floater airtime? It's got hills like that. And I was hoping for maybe more of like the Blue Streak return run a little bit. You do still get some nice float because you have the buzz bars and you're not being stapled by the orange lap bars. But I think the return run, I could do with a little bit more intense airtime on the return hills. And then there's a helix at the end, which is nice. But Timber Terror I was really happy with. If I had to try and compare it to some rides that maybe some other folks are more familiar with, I think Blue Streak is actually maybe a decent comparison. If you know Zeus up there at Mount Olympus, it's got a very similar layout to Zeus. It doesn't have the double down that Zeus has. The return run on Zeus, I think, is a little bit more intense, but Timber Terror, I think, is much smoother, and the outrun is better. So I think there's some good comparisons there. I would maybe put it just a little bit above Zeus. It's much smoother and much more rewritable than Zeus. So, not a bad thing, though. Certainly, I would say it's pretty much what I expected that ride to be based on where I've seen other people rank it and what I've heard about it. I rank it, if I don't have my list in front of me, but it's somewhere in the 30s, 40s, which is typically where it comes in the thrilling 32. So I would say Timber Terror was very pleased with this ride, meeting expectations for sure. So you don't care about wood coasters, so I don't expect any input from you here.
Yeah, I'm just here for moral support for the moment.
Yeah, well, that's right. I expect you to be a little bit more vocal here because, much to my surprise, I'm putting Railblazer at number 4. And reason being, I didn't have very high expectations after riding Wonder Woman. I remember my talks about Wonder Woman, it kind of met expectations, but I kind of grimaced when I said it met expectations. Railblazer, I would say, slightly exceeded expectations. I thought Railblazer was smoother than Wonder Woman for
it's
whatever.
A clone, Danny.
What's that?
It's a clone.
Well, yeah, it's a mirror image clone, but all three of us, Sue, Adam, and myself, I remember telling you how every 200 feet on Wonder Woman there was a shuddering, and it was like it was hitting a speed bump. Railblazer didn't have that except for one spot at the end of the ride coming out of the last corkscrew. And it didn't have that anywhere else on the ride. Wonder Woman had a place like that at the bottom of the first drop, coming out of the dive loop, coming out of the helix. It had one in the middle of that helix thing.
Was it the temperature? Was it hot when you rode Wonder Woman?
It was hot when we rode both of them. I mean, it was in the high 80s when we rode Railblazer. It was... The real feel was right around 100 when we rode Wonder Woman. So, I mean, it was hot both days. It was sunny both days. I did notice, and it's us three as well, but Josh Ranger from In the Loop lives fairly close to Six Flags Fiesta Texas, and he's ridden both as well. And he had been saying the same thing. He rode Railblazer a couple weeks before we did, and he said that he enjoyed it much better. He thought that it was much smoother for whatever reason and didn't have that the shakiness that Wonder Woman had. Even getting onto the train, I remember I said to you how Wonder Woman, just sitting in the car, I felt it kind of wobble back and forth. Railblazer didn't do that, getting in or out, and when it came to the brake run, it didn't do that either. Certainly not as much as Wonder Woman.
That could be a product of the moving station, though. Maybe. Obviously, it's going to sit differently in the station if it's stationary versus if it's moving on a conveyor belt. Those two systems have to be a little bit different, I would think.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. And I think the other thing to consider here is how many times we rode it and how many times we were able to ride it. We bought the Gold Flash Pass at Six Flags Fiesta Texas, and that includes one ride on Wonder Woman. So we rode it first thing in the morning and waited about 40 minutes for it, and then used Flash Pass later in the day and rode it twice. And we didn't have much heartbreak over that because we knew that the fast lane was good for unlimited rides at California's Great America. We're going on a Saturday, so we got the fast lane. And so we rode Wonder Woman twice, and by 10:15, we had ridden Railblazer 3 times. In both front and back because it's on Platinum Pass holder early entry, and then we had the fast lane. So we ended up riding Railblazer 10 times by the end of the day, all about the train, front, back, middle, everywhere. So I think that certainly had something to do with it as well, and not needing to wait in the line. Most people are saying they prefer the back on the single rails because of the yank on the first drop. Adam and I came to agreement that we actually preferred the front. Number one, I think the airtime is a little bit better going over some of the hills, especially on that dive loop. In the back, you don't really come out of your seat. You just kind of get whipped through it. In the front, you get the airtime going into that dive loop, and while you're out of your seat, you get whipped to the side. And I thought in general, I thought the helix was better. I thought there was some better forces in the front on the helix as well. And you still get the airtime, on a lot of the drops in the front that you do in the back because the train is going pretty fast. So I preferred Railblazer and Wonder Woman in the front, but I prefer Railblazer to Wonder Woman, and I was much happier with Railblazer than I was with Wonder Woman, and there's a lot of different factors in there, but Railblazer, I'll put it number 4 here. I'm interested your thoughts there because you've ridden Railblazer but not Wonder Woman.
I had one ride on Railblazer, and that was enough. I could have gone back at any point in the day and rewrote it. I had no desire to go back on it. I thought it was a good ride. I just wasn't floored by it. Like it just doesn't have, to me, it doesn't have a ride experience that's shocking, or I feel like what you see on the videos that you've seen over and over and over, from the test runs to everything, that's what you get on it. And it doesn't feel as fast as some of the videos portray it to be. To me, I felt like it was like a normal paced ride. I didn't feel like it was going exceptionally fast at any point in the course.
Did it feel to you like, we've heard a lot of people say this, did it feel to you like it was one big element as opposed to a sequence of elements?
I don't know. It's so short. I could see why people say that, but to me, it's like it's going through different stuff. It's kind of like that typical RMC where it's going through stuff just because the designer's like, oh, let's do this now. Let's do this now. Let's get us back to the station. And it just doesn't have any good pacing to me.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. We thought it does happen so quickly that it's almost like there isn't a pacing to it. The pacing is just balls to the wall for 30 seconds, and then that's.
I would even say that. I don't think it's that balls to the wall, to be completely honest with you. I think it's a normal paced ride. I don't think, like I said to you earlier, if you were to put, an aero looper and compress it a little bit and put better restraints on it, it's doing the same inversions. It's doing corkscrews and obviously standard loops. It doesn't. I just don't get the fascination here. I actually like what you said earlier, comparing this to a dive coaster, where it's a compressed, faster dive coaster in my mind.
Yeah, I think I would still say the same thing there. It's a tighter dive coaster with a longer train. I think even though it doesn't statistically go faster than most of the dive coasters, it feels like it's a bit more.
It's compressed. It's tighter, like you said. That when you look at Valraven and everything's drawn out on the dive coaster, because you have
the dive coasters are more graceful, whereas this is more agile. I think is maybe the word I'm looking for. I don't know. But the other thing, Railblazer had some good visuals too. There's a good head chopper coming out of the last corkscrew with the rocks that forms the tunnel, or the whatever you want to call it, over the first drop. Wonder Woman doesn't have any of that. There were 1 or 2 spots where there was a good head chopper, or you kind of whiz by a rock, and I think that added a little bit of something too. And it does have a little bit of theming, which is kind of cool. I like the cars better. The ATVs look pretty cool. I think they looked a little bit nicer than the Wonder Woman ones, which were, kind of looked like an afterthought. So, but I was happy with Railblazer, and I enjoyed my 10 rides.
And I'll say this too, that Railblazer and the single rail, this model, this style, I'm hoping RMC in the future doesn't just build these like B&M built Batmans, because Batman, I feel like something like Batman, like that was intense. That's a great, I like Batman better than this, and I know they're 2 different style rides. But my fear is that coming up in 2019, that we're going to see more single rails across the Six Flags chain, or maybe even the Cedar Fair chain. Who knows? And I'm hoping that we don't get the same layout, because if we do, I'm not excited for that at all. At any point, like I wrote it out.
No, it'd be good to change it up, I think.
It would be good to change it up. It would be good to have a unique layout. That this layout is good enough, but I don't think it's spectacular. Like I'm not going to sit here and rave about it. I still rank it probably in the same place you rank. But it's because where are you going to rank it? In your 50s, probably?
Well, let's see if I have this up here. Yeah, I have them right around, right around the 50 mark.
And that's where I'm going to rank it too. And you have a much different opinion, a much different opinion on what 50 means to you versus what 50 means to me.
Mm-hmm.
50 to me is an average ride. That it's not superior, it's not above average. That this is something you go to the park. It's fun to ride when you're there. I'm not saying it's not a fun ride, but do I want to see this cloned in every Six Flags? No, not at all. There's so many other different models I'd rather see cloned in other.
Well, and I think it would be cool to kind of keep these to be somewhat unique. I mean, I'm okay if there's other single rails somewhere, but I don't want to see the same layout 10 times because, I don't know.
I'm actually quite shocked that the two parks clone this, that Cedar Fair and Six Flags. I'm still shocked by it, that there's two of the same ride in the same year. I know they're two different parks and very far apart from one another, but I'm still shocked that that's the route and the situation we're in today.
Yeah, it is kind of peculiar to see two different chains do a mirrored clone of the same ride, and still yet apparently to at least the people I've talked to who have ridden both, seems quite a bit different between the two. I thought
Cedar Fair fanboys.
Well, I thought it was funny because when you rode Railblazer, you put in a group. You said, having ridden Railblazer, I can only hope that Wonder Woman's better. And I remember replying to that comment by saying, having ridden Wonder Woman, I can only hope that Railblazer is better.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to say I did enjoy. I don't know if Railblazer's any better, but I enjoyed it more for some of the reasons we talked about. So there we go. Let's move on to number 3 here. And I had a tough time between number 2 and 3 because they were two rides that I was really looking forward to and that I knew I was going to enjoy both of them. And I decided that number 2 was going to be the ride that I didn't know what to expect as much. And I decided number 3 would be the ride that it kind of went in knowing what to expect. So for number 3, I ended up coming out with Joker at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. Had heard very many reviews, including Adam, who was with us, who had ridden Joker 2 years back and had been saying it was very much like Wicked Cyclone. He didn't think it was quite as good as Wicked Cyclone. Thought Wicked Cyclone was a bit more aggressive and was maybe a bit quicker on its faster days. Wicked Cyclone, we've both ridden Wicked Cyclone on slow days, and it's slow,
Magic Wheel.
for sure. What's that?
Hashtag Magic Wheels.
Yes, exactly. The Magic Wheels make Wicked Cyclone go much faster on its good days, but that's good. But Joker did a lot of the same things that Wicked Cyclone did, but it did a lot of different things too. I think the drop was definitely different. We've had some straight drops on RMCs before. We've had the barrel roll drop. This one was a little bit different in the sense that it kind of twists on the way. It was kind of like Iron Rattler's drop that didn't go back the other way. It was kind of like if you cut Iron Rattler's drop in half.
Yeah, I was going to say,
kept,
because Iron Rattler's drop is really good, and I didn't feel like this one was very memorable.
No, if you cut Iron Rattler's drop in half and didn't have it twist 3 times, just had it twist the one way, that's kind of what this one felt like. In the back seat, I thought it was really good because, you got the coming out of the seat action and kind of got the twist on the way down. The first inversion really surprised me. I thought it was a little bit different than some of the other RMC inversions. The Twisted Cyclone down at Six Flags Over Georgia has a similar first inversion where it kind of rolls one way but then turns the other when you get up to the top of the element. So I'm thinking maybe I'll enjoy that element on Twisted Cyclone when I finally do get down there, probably next year at this point. I was really impressed with Joker's stall as well. Between the Twisted Colossus one, the Goliath one, and this one, I think this might be the best of the 3 0G stalls. I thought this one had a little bit better hang time than the other two, and I felt it was a little bit more drawn out than the other two as well.
I don't even remember this stall. That's the shocking part about it. Like, you kept talking about this stall. I'm like, I don't even remember a stall on this ride. Like Goliath's stall is like memorable. You go into the first inversion and then you go into the other one, and it's like a 1-2 punch. That's like, oh my god, I can't believe that.
Well, I think Goliath's stall is far and away probably the best element on that ride. You can make an argument maybe for the speed hill, but the Goliath stall to me, I felt was.
I didn't even feel like you stalled on Joker. Like, I felt like you went upside down, and it was like you were just upside down.
No, there was some significant hang time on this one, and Goliath's is weird because Goliath, you're going fast enough through it that you're not like falling out of your seat, but you're not going fast enough to be pressed into your seat. It's like a B&M floater airtime hill upside down.
My ride on Joker was just so much faster than yours, and I just didn't, because my ride on Joker was flying that day. Like, it was very fast. So maybe I just went through everything much quicker.
Maybe that's why
I had the magic wheels.
Well, maybe that's why you actually sort of enjoyed it then. But I thought Joker had some really solid airtime. I thought the 3 inversions were pretty good. I actually liked the first inversion much more. I wasn't expecting much out of that first inversion. I was expecting the stall to be the runaway best element on that ride, and I still think it's the best element on that ride, but the first inversion I was really happy with too. And then you do get some good positive force coming out of it too, and you get some good speed coming out of it into the stall. The double down is nice. The barrel roll towards the end was nice. My only complaint maybe about Joker is I think there was one too many turns of the overbanks, and we've talked about this before. After the speed, there's the double down, and then there's that speed hill, and then there's an overbank that kind of goes up against the lift hill before it does the double hop, I guess as I'll call it. That turn, I think, was taken, I think, killed a little bit of the speed. And then there's that double hop. There's good airtime there. The overbank after that, I think, is fine. The barrel roll's fine. There's an overbank after that, which is fine. The last airtime hill is really good. There was just 1 or 2 turns in there that I was kind of like, keep going, keep the speed up. So that's fine. Wicked Cyclone has one of those spots before the last barrel roll where it kind of does 3 little overbanks within the structure where it kind of feels like a throwaway part of the ride just for the sake of changing direction. I felt Joker had that one spot as well where I thought it was a turn for the sake of going in the other direction and not really to do anything. So maybe similar complaints between the two. I decided that I don't like Joker quite as much as Wicked Cyclone, but I would put it kind of right in the discussion. I ended up deciding to put Joker right below Iron Rattler, but above New Texas Giant, right sandwiched between those two. So that puts it right in the middle of the pack for the RMCs for me, and that's not a bad thing. I enjoy Joker very much. It's a top 25 coaster for me on the steel side of things. So that's good news for me, and I was very impressed with Joker. I think it has probably one of the best Weeble wobbles, maybe except for maybe Steel Vengeance, which has 2 little airtime hills. The joke we were making was, why is it launched out of the station? It's just like every time we rode Joker 12 times, and every time Adam and I looked to each other and said, why is this a launch? Like it leaves really fast. I mean, I don't mind it. I think it's cool. But it was kind of strange.
I think I'm to the point with a lot of these RMCs now that, yeah, they all have, unique elements and unique layouts. But I feel like I'm arguing over which B&M hyper is the best. Like, ultimately,
to a point, I think that's kind of what it is at this point, right?
And that's what I kind of texted you after I wrote it. It's like everything's beginning to feel very similar to me. And like Steel Vengeance is so far outside of everything else, and I almost feel
Well,
like
that I agree with. Don't get me wrong. That I agree with.
and I almost feel like Twisted Cyclone was kind of like a mini Steel Vengeance in some ways.
Okay.
And that's why I kind of like that one better than all these other ones. This one was a solid ride. I probably have it in my mid-30s somewhere.
Okay.
But like I said, I'm beginning to feel, and that's not surprising because wood coasters all have similar layouts. This one I thought would feel a lot different because it was a GCI layout, and I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel like it felt so drastically different than all the other RMCs. So I don't know if I was kind of disappointed by that because I'm like, well, GCI, it kind of felt like a steel GCI almost to me. Like, I don't know if you got that.
Well, I mean, it was a GCI, so.
But I'm just saying that I don't think RMC deviated that much from the GCI layout, whereas other coasters, like when Iron Rattler gets RMC'd or when, you know, another wood coaster gets RMC'd, the RMC conversion is drastically different than what was previously there.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
this I didn't feel that way. This I felt like it still felt a lot like a GCI.
Okay. No, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. You know, I'm so you liked it better than Wicked Cyclone though.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I don't even rank Wicked Cyclone. Like,
Well, I know you don't.
But I did like Twisted Cyclone better, which I'm kind of surprised that, you know, other people have said that this one's better. This one's longer, so I guess people who like longer rides are going to like this one better.
Yeah.
But I like Twisted Cyclone because I thought it was short, got to the point, did what it had to do, and then let you off the train. That's what I liked about it.
Okay. No, I think that's fair, and we kind of had the thoughts that would be the reviews for Twisted Cyclone because it was on the shorter side.
Side, and I think it's a good short coaster, which is crazy to me because like Wicked Cyclone feels so much longer than like a Railblazer does, but yet it's still ride time is still pretty similar to one another.
Yeah.
And I think Twisted Cyclone is far better than Railblazer too. What they did there, that wave turn by itself is a better element than anything on either of these two rides. I feel.
Okay. No, I think that's fair. All right. So
and it's not in California, which helps.
Well, there you go. Anyways.
But it is in Atlanta, so that's not much better.
Yeah, so, well, you know, you get what you pay for. So number 2 is Tremors at Silverwood, and this was the big one. This is the one that we were really, really looking forward to, and this ride is really, really good. I would say if you're a fan of Rampage, it's not quite as wild and out of control as Rampage. It's not quite as intense with the laterals as Rampage or even Legend. If you've ridden Excalibur, which is at Funtown Splashtown in Maine, it's got a lot of similarities to that. I like Tremors a little bit better than Excalibur. Tremors has some great tunnels. It's got 4 tunnels. The first drop goes right into a tunnel underneath the gift shop, and then it emerges from the gift shop in a speed hill down into another tunnel. And then it comes up into another hill, which has really good airtime, even in the back seat. And then it goes into its spaghetti bowl, which pins you to the right side of the train for about 6 or 7 seconds, a la Legend. Then it's got a couple more hills, and it pins you to the left side in another turn. There is one spot in the ride before the finale where it comes out of a left-hand turn. It does a little bit of an airtime hill, and then it goes up to a hill that is a little bit higher, and it goes a little slow over that hill, and then it drops into a tunnel, and that drop is really good. There's good airtime there into the third tunnel. Then it does another speed hill, which has a bigger drop on the other side of it than it does on the front side into another tunnel that goes over the exit path, very similar to what it does at the beginning of the ride with the speed hill, and then it does the final turn into the station. We preferred the back seat. Both seats are very good. I think it's a little bit wilder in the back. The first drop is a little bit wilder. I think you get a little bit more lats because you're being pulled through the spaghetti bowl. Really enjoyed this. Rode it 6 times. Really enjoyed every ride on it. Definitely a ride that speeds up as the day goes on. We rode it around 11 o'clock or 11:30, 12 o'clock shortly after opening. And the second half of the ride felt a little bit sluggish, which, wood coasters especially do tend to feel a little bit sluggish, when they have high points late in the ride like that. And it's got topper track in weird spots. Like, I knew that this ride had topper track, but it wasn't where I expected it to be. It was kind of going up the airtime hill and into the spaghetti bowl, but the spaghetti bowl itself was still regular wood. And then it had another turn where, like, the first half of it was topper track, but the second half where it's going faster is still regular wood. And you could feel where you were on the topper track because you weren't shaking side to side at all. And I don't know if that makes it go slower or faster. I don't know enough people who have ridden this ride and ridden it before the topper track went on to really get a good feel for if that makes it go faster, slower, or if it doesn't really matter. But the topper track was interesting.
Now, Danny, there are some viewers that don't know what topper track is, as I've learned.
Yes, well, we have learned that recently here.
Topper track is wood coaster track. It's just like Outlaw Run's track. It's like Goliath's track. It has a thicker steel plate at the top, about 2 inches. It's still considered by most people as wood coaster. It's not an Iron Horse track. RMC does other stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. And, rides like Le Monster up at La Ronde have topper tracking parts. The Six Flags New England Cyclone before the Iron Horse conversion had topper tracking spots. And it was very noticeable on those two rides, I thought. And I thought it was very noticeable on this ride. This ride is far superior to either of those. And I remember saying to you on the preview show, this did not have to be a top 10 coaster for me to exceed and meet my expectations and for me to be happy with it. And it's right around the 20 mark, which is about where I thought it would be based on what I had heard and where it has ranked on some other people's lists, and also the Thrilling 32. This has kind of been one of those bubble coasters where some years it's made it and some years it's not. So I figured, maybe in that mid to high 20s range would probably be about where it might be, and it's coming in for me a little bit above that. So very happy with Tremors. Enjoyed it a great deal. Certainly very unique and has a good mix of airtime and laterals. I would say it has probably a little bit more airtime than Legend does. Legend is a very lateral intensive ride. This doesn't have nearly the laterals that Legend does, and it doesn't have quite the airtime that Rampage does. But it's got more airtime than Legend, and I would say the lats are maybe a little bit tamer than a Rampage or Legend, but it's the same sort of forces you would come to expect out of CCI rides like that. I would say it's one of the better CCI coasters for sure, and I really enjoy most of them. So if you are a fan of CCI, you will be a fan of Tremors, as we definitely are. Certainly an outstanding ride. So, so people are probably wondering what the hell number one is. And if you remember the preview show, there's one coaster we haven't talked about yet, and it was the surprise of the trip, and it was the very first ride of the trip. It was the coaster at PNE Playland in Vancouver, and Andy, you and I have been skeptical of this ride the last couple of years. It always does well in the Thrilling 32, and I remember you and we watched POVs of it together one night, and we said, this ride looks weird. Like, it looks like it could be really good, but it looks like it could kind of be nothing special too. And I remember you said, well, the only way we're going to know is if one of us goes up there and rides it. And so we went up there, and I rode it, and it was it surprised the hell out of me. The first time we got off the ride, I looked at Sue and Adam. I said, "That ride scared me." It's one of those rides that picks up the intensity as the ride goes on. We rode it in the front and the back, and the way I would describe it is, if most people have ridden the Phoenix and they know what the airtime is like on the Phoenix, And the buzz bar on the Phoenix kind of comes in and touches your tummy because that's how far it extends. If you took the Phoenix lap bar and pushed it away from you like 3 inches, so instead of touching your tummy, it's like maybe 12 to 16 inches above your thighs and maybe 6 inches away from your stomach so that you're not touching it at all while you're sitting in the seat. That's where this lap bar is. There's no seat belts. There's no seat dividers. Ace Coaster Classic, because it doesn't have individual seat belts, no seat dividers, no headrests. And it's got Phoenix-like airtime with these lap bars. And it scared the living shit out of me the first time we rode this ride. We rode in the back seat the first time. The first drop is nice. The second drop is nice. There's good airtime. There's a little bit of lats in the first half. And then you drop off the mid-course brake run, which has skid brakes that doesn't slow you down. And there is a kink in this drop that sends you flying forward. And at that point, I started to get a little bit scared. And then there's a flat bit, and it goes into a turn that is not banked at all. And unlike like the Coney Island Cyclone, where the turns are underneath each other as it turns back, the turns on this ride are nested inside the previous circuit's turn. So the turns get tighter and tighter and tighter as it goes around the circuit. So the lats are some of the most intense I've experienced. We're talking legend-like lateral forces in the second half of this ride, going up and down. And then there are 2 bunny hills on the last leg that go next to the lift hill that are straight up ejector, try and throw you from the train airtime. And we rode this ride 6 times. And every single ride, I could not keep from putting at least one arm down on the underside of the lap bar because I legitimately thought I was coming out of the train. When we rode in the back seat and Sue was in the row in front of us, I remember at one point on one of those rides actually coming so far out that my hand that was up in the air actually ended up on Sue's shoulder. That's how far out of the train, both up and forward, I was coming. And it was the same in the front row too. I actually saw the oil can on the front of the car when we were sitting in the front of the train. These are weird little trains. I imagine if Millennium Flyers were designed in the 1950s, that's what these trains are, because they look like Millennium Flyers that are 50 years old. They're very, very odd trains, but the ride's really smooth because of that, because they're single bench cars. They're 8 rows. They have the oil can on the front, so it's like self-lubricating. It doesn't have wheels on the inside of the rails. It's got the upstops, which you're riding half the. What's that?
That makes it a coaster.
Right. And it's got the road wheels on top, but the road wheels, instead of having the inside wheels, it's got flanged road wheels like railroad cars. And that is what acts keeping it, within the 2 rails, which is interesting. Very, very few rides have that style wheel. I think the Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain has something similar, and it's got axles that pivot. I could be wrong on that. But these are very, very clear flange wheels. Certainly sort of a step back in time, one of those old school coasters. They don't make them like that anymore with those kinds of lap bars. And I imagine that I imagine when people talk about how some of those old coasters from the 20s and 30s that aren't around anymore, that people always talk to real highly, I imagine they were something like this ride was. I can't imagine if this ride was in the States that insurance companies would let them get away with those trains, because it's a 48-inch height requirement. And like we have friends who have kids that are barely 48 inches. The Breckners who live up in this neck of the woods here in Ithaca, his little boy just hit 54 inches, and his younger kid, I think, is just over the 48-inch mark. And I could not imagine that kid being on this ride and not coming out. I don't see how people don't come out of this ride. It's that crazy. And was certainly the surprise of the trip, and I made a very good decision making it my 650th coaster milestone for sure. Definitely the most I've laughed on a ride, and probably the most I've been scared on a roller coaster of actually coming out in quite some time. And for you and me who have traveled to a lot of rides, to get that feeling on a coaster is not something we often experience. To be genuinely surprised by a ride the way that I was surprised by the PNE coaster. I will say it lives up to the hype. It is as good and maybe better than advertised by some of the folks who have ridden it. And they were only running one train. We were told that at some points they run 3 trains at a time. And when they do that, there's a guy at the back who has the brake lever, for the exit to move it to the entrance, and then another guy in the front who has the brake lever to make it leave the station. And with only running one train, they were pulling the lap bars down and checking them before they dispatched. But we were told when they run 3 trains, they actually just push the lap bar down as you're rolling out of the station, that guy in the front. And you just hop in, they let it go, and they push the lap bar down as you're going out of the station. Then they bring the next train forward, and it's like 15-second dispatch, and that would never fly in the United States. So thank God this ride's in Canada, and certainly a ride that we would go back to next time we go back to that region, whatever that may be. If you're a wood coaster fan and you like ejector airtime and you like being scared on old school rickety wooden coasters, the PNE coaster is one to go ride for sure.
Well, that's exciting. It's good.
Yeah, I was really happy. I was surprised, happy. Cannot say good enough things about it. Well, and got to ride the Final Destination corkscrew at that park, so that was quite interesting. And the Silverwood corkscrew, the first ever looping coaster in modern day. So a couple of weird corkscrew landmark coasters too in this trip. Really, really strange, but had a good time on the trip for sure.
Well, I don't know if there's another road trip rundown coming up here. Is this our last one of the season?
I don't think you're not taking any big trips here. I'm taking a few trips, but only going to ride 1 or 2 new rides. Yeah. So probably won't do them there. So if this is the last one of the year, this is certainly one that has some lesser known parks. Like I said, PNE, if nothing else, just for the coasters, one to go to. Silverwood is a great park as well. Kind of reminded me of a mix of Holiday World and Knott's Berry Farm. It was like Knott's Berry Farm's theme in the Holiday World sized package. So it's only 5 hours or so away from Seattle. So if you wanted to do a long weekend up in that area, you could easily do PNE, Wild Waves, and Silverwood. And if you wanted, you can fly to Oakland, San Francisco, LA, even Vegas, even Salt Lake City to do Lagoon, and kind of make it a multi-park trip there. But Silverwood's certainly a park to visit, and Coaster certainly a ride to go ride. Lots of good things to say about the things we did on this trip.
Well, season 1 of Road Trip Rundowns has been fun. Season 2, Danny, season 2 is gonna. I don't even know.
Oh wait, Rob Dole, I'm going over to Europe, so we're gonna have a giant. We're gonna have a giant road trip rundown coming sometime.
I can't even imagine that show is gonna be at least 4.5 hours long.
I should probably do a top 10 for that.
Oh, good Lord!
I should probably do that. Should probably just be like an hour-long show. We'll bring Rob Dole on maybe, and
oh, Lord.
and he can just complain for an hour.
As always, I am Andy Barchek from Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, Red Warriors.
See you guys.